Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 38 of our reading of Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, 26 Unforgettable Explorations into the Realm of the Supernatural, adapted by Walter B. Gibson. Now, we are going to go over the copyright information, which should be on your screen currently. Okay, let's see. Says here, Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone is copyright 1963 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated. Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited is copyright 1964 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated. All rights reserved. This 1983 production is published by Bonanza Books, distributed by Outlet Book Company Incorporated, Random House Company, and the address is there. This book was previously published as two separate works entitled Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone and Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited, printed and bound in the United States of America, and the Library of Congress information is there if you're interested in that. In the last one, Matt Kiley got his comeuppance for killing Silent John Moreland. And now we are ready to just finish off this story and then go to the next one. So let's pick this up where we left off. That didn't help Matt Kiley as the Lone Star plowed on, despite the clang of bells from the pilot house. The curved side of the steamboat stretched toward the swimming gambler. Then the paddle box was upon him. With a shriek, Matt vanished under the sweep of a 30-foot wheel that churned its way over him. Behind the Lone Star lay a bubbly wake, with no sign of Matt Kiley. That wasn't surprising. Those paddles have a way of mangling their victim and mingling them deep in the Mississippi mud. They talked about it in the social hall after the steamboat tied up for the night amid the thickening fog. Dave Shelby, down from the pilot house, introduced Hiram Moreland to members of the crew who had known Silent John. Neither Dave nor Hiram talked about those ghastly visitations that had happened in Newbury. Newbury, actually. They said they had guessed that Matt Kiley was responsible for the wreck of the Dixie Belle, and that Hiram Moreland had played his brother's ghost to trick the gambler into a confession. That story satisfied all who heard it. The money Hiram had won, he turned over to Dave for the River Pilots Beneficial Fund to be donated in the name of John Moreland. With a sigh of relief, Hiram said, "It worked as we had hoped, but we needed luck. I've heard of those fog reflections, but this was the first time I ever saw one. Looking up into that foggy moonlight, I would have sworn I saw the Lone Star coming at herself like another ship." He turned to Dave Shelby. "Of course," Hiram added, "you couldn't have seen it that way up in the pilot house." "No," conceded Dave, "I didn't. All I saw was the shape of another pilot house coming at me. If we were high up in the clouds of another world." "Another pilot house with a wheel and pilot behind it?" "Yes, but it wasn't a reflection of the Lone Star. It was the pilot house I had been in a lot more often and knew a lot better, with a pilot whom I had never expected to see again." Dave said nothing further, for he knew that Hiram understood. There in the fog, Dave Shelby had gained one fleeting evanescent glimpse of his old chief, Silent John Moreland, at the wheel of the Dixie Belle. And that is going to do it for this particular story, and we will start the next one. Okay, now we are going to start the Purple Testament. I have no idea what this is going to be about, but it should be pretty good. Captain Phil Riker watched the trucks rumble closer. One by one, each loaded with its quota of infantrymen back from combat. They had returned all of them to the Philippine Islands in the year 1944, thinking that the war was won. We find that there was still a lot of fighting to be done. If you could return at all from that sort of fighting, you would be doing well. So all these boys were doing well, though. So all these boys were doing well, though none of them looked it. They looked bad, very bad. They were dirty, hollow-eyed, each face showing the shock that was the aftermath of violence, each face creviced with lines of utter fatigue and the backwash of sheer fear. As company commander, Captain Riker wonder if this is where they got the idea for Star Trek The Next Generation. This character. Captain Riker wanted to know whose faces individuality. Oh, Captain Riker wanted to know those faces individually, but they changed so too often and too grimly. That was up to the platoon leaders, whose face Riker knew, perhaps too well. From their faces, Riker could tell again, perhaps too well, what was happening to the men under their command. The truck stopped, and the driver came around and dropped the tailgate. The men dropped down mechanically, one by one. The sergeant was helping a wounded man, and Riker moved closer. "Evening, Captain," the sergeant greeted him. "Ain't it been a crummy night?" Riker nodded. "Pretty rough, eh, Sergeant?" The sergeant nodded and returned and brought a bent cigarette from his pocket. While he was straightening it, Riker provided a light. The sergeant nodded his thanks. "We got the bridge," he reported. Whatever they wanted it for. The Japs have naval guns stuck in the ground, and they've zeroed in on the town. That bridge gets it every 3 minutes. And how many did we lose? 10 men wounded, maybe 12. The sergeant's face turned grim and added, 4 dead. A tall, gaunt figure stalked towards Captain Riker, looking up and recognized it. Captain Riker looked up and recognized Second Lieutenant Hugh Fitzgerald, who promptly added the names of the 4, Hibbard, Horton, Morgan, and Levy. With that, Lieutenant Fitzgerald swung to the sergeant. "Take care of the company, Sergeant. Make sure they all get hot coffee and a meal. If they're not hungry, have them eat anyways. After that, bed them down." The sergeant snapped to a salute. "Yes, sir." He gave the order, and the straggly column of men followed him from the trucks toward the tents. The trucks pulled ahead, leaving the company commander and the lieutenant standing on the darkened road. Riker gestured toward the lighted tent and ordered, "Come on." In the tent, a Coleman lantern shone brightly on the big wooden crate that served as a desk for the company commander. There was a large map board set close to the desk and an army cot in the corner beyond that. Riker sat down on the cot, reached beneath for a bottle and cup, and poured a drink into the cup, handed it to Fitzgerald, and then drank from the bottle as he commented, "Another rough day, Fitz." "Really, real rough." Fitz gave a nervous headshake. 12 wounded, 4 dead, all in 2.5 hours. 12 wounded, 4 dead. The note of finality in Fitz's tone brought a probing stare from Riker's gaunt, keen face. "We've lost 4 men before," Riker reminded him. "We've lost 8 and 10. You're taking this harder than usual, Fitz. Anything special about these 4 men?" "They were all kids under 22. Fitz's tone was tense. "Does it have to be more special than that?" "No, it doesn't, but this has gotten to you, Fitz. I'd like to know why." "Would you? All right, look at this." From the pocket of his fatigue shirt, Fitz brought a crumpled sheet of paper, which he smoothed and handed to Riker. The company commander read the 4 names that he had heard before: Hibbard, Horton, Morgan, Levy. Riker looked up, studying Fitzgerald again, and added, 4 KIAs, killed in actions. That's what they are. That's what they are, Fitz nodded. "Killed in action. Philippines, June 13th, 1944. I'll tell you what's gotten to me, Captain." Fitz hesitated, then announced bluntly, "I wrote those names down yesterday. I wrote them down before we went up, before I could even have begun to guess." Fitz broke off, and Riker nodded encouragingly. "Why did you write their names down, Fitz? Go on, tell me." "We were having a weapons check yesterday morning," Fitz said. "I looked at 44 faces, but when I got to those 4, something came over them. It was almost like a light that that's the only way I can describe it. I knew was that was to be their last day. I knew they'd get it. Then driving up the highway this morning, I was in their truck. All four were sitting across from me, and I saw the same odd look again. They were completely set apart from the others, as if someone had picked out those four faces with a searchlight. Though it was broad daylight at the time, again I knew. Riker pondered briefly, then he asked, "Did this ever happen before, Fitz?" "Yes, in a way." "Well, in a way, yes," Fitz replied. "I guess it's been growing on me. I'd noticed an odd look, a kind of glow on a soldier's face, and it would strike me as sort of funny, like, only it wasn't funny when I didn't see that face again, except maybe when it was dead." "And did you make note of those?" "No, I didn't. It just struck me as kind of a coincidence, you know? Any guy might look odd, and any guy might get it. But when four of them stood out just that plain, I knew what it meant. That's why I wrote those names down." Riker studied the paper again. "You're sure you wrote these names down yesterday? You're sure it wasn't today, on the way back in the truck?" "It was yesterday morning, Captain," Fitz insisted. "I swear that's when I wrote them down." "Take it easy then, Fitz. Get some sleep. You'll need it real bad." "I know that because I haven't slept much. The way this thing has grown on me. If every time I stand in front of a platoon, ready to take them up, am I going to look down the line and tell which ones aren't coming back? We're not supposed to know such things. We shouldn't be able to tell." "I know that, Fitz. Let's forget it until tomorrow." Fitzgerald's response was a sigh of relief. His problem was still on his mind, but at least Riker was now sharing part of the burden. That night, the lieutenant enjoyed some of the sleep he so badly needed. In the morning, he met Captain Riker, and the two of them went over to a dilapidated schoolhouse that the Army had commandeered as a hospital. Then Fitzgerald went upstairs to a ward to visit the wounded men from his platoon, while Riker was making a routine report to Captain Roy Gunther, the medical officer in charge. The report proved to be more than mere routine. Like Riker, Gunther knew Fitzgerald well. Riker gave the doctor a verbatim account of Fitzgerald's statement and showed him the paper with the four names. Gunther, a serious man in his mid-40s, weighed the matter carefully. It could be some mental aberration, he decided, but it's hard to tell. His record is good. He's never been he's never been wounded, nor shown evidence of battle fatigue. Why should he get this weird idea all of a sudden? It's obviously illusory. "But Fitz believes it," Riker put in. "To hear him tell it, Doc, you'd almost believe it yourself. I'd appreciate you checking him over when he gets through visiting the boys in his platoon. He's let's see. Okay, wait. But Fitzgerald believes it," Riker put in. "To hear him tell it, Doctor, you'd almost believe it yourself. I'd appreciate you checking him over when he gets through visiting the boys in his platoon. He's one of the best officers we've got, and I don't want to lose him. So perhaps I shouldn't let Fitzgerald know you told me about this," completed Gunther with a wan smile. "I won't, Captain. I'll handle this subtly as I can." Fitzgerald, meanwhile, up in the ward, was chatting with a 19-year-old GI known as Smitty, whose right arm was in a suspended cast and whose face was very pale. But Smitty's smile was cheerful as he kept his lips pressed on a dangling cigarette. "You didn't come out so bad, Smitty," Fitz assured him. "When you get that arm patched up, you'll be heading home. That won't be hard to take, will it?" "No, sir, it sure won't. Your cigarette has gone out." Fitz produced a pack of matches. "Steadily now, while I light it for you." "No, thanks, Lieutenant." Smitty's tone was weary. "Could you just lay it there in the ashtray for me? I'll smoke it later." Fitzgerald complied. "Take care, Smitty," he said in parting, and turned to leave, taking out a cigarette pack of his own. As he shook it to joggle out a cigarette. The pack slipped from Fitz's hand and it landed by the door. When he stooped to recover the pack, his gaze reverted to Smitty's cot. That was when Lieutenant Fitzgerald froze, his mouth phrased and an unuttered no. That uncanny, unwanted power of Fitz's had returned at a most unexpected moment. There, as clearly as he had described it to Riker, Fitz saw the same eerie glow that had highlighted the faces of yesterday's KIAs. Only this time it was shining on one's face alone, that of the wounded boy, Smitty. Now, as though hypnotized by the strange ethereal light, Fitzgerald began to sway. He was struggling to find his voice and with it shake off the paralyzing sensation that seemed to clutch his throat. He swayed against the doorframe where his head thudded heavily. His senses were engulfed in a purplish haze that seemed to be swallowing his body. He collapsed on the floor halfway through the door. A passing orderly heard the clatter of Fitz's fall and dashed back from the stairway. He tried to help Fitz to his feet, asking, "Are you okay, Lieutenant? Are you okay?" His mind was shrouded in that purple pall. Fitz's imagery spread like the pages of an open book, which suddenly clamped right shut and faded as his senses returned. Then, with the orderly's help, he reached his feet and rubbed his head. "I'm all right," Fitz said. "I guess it was just a dizzy spell. Things went out like a light." Fitz was looking toward the cot now, fearful that he would see the eerie glow again. He saw Smitty, but not plainly, for Fitz's vision was still blurred. But the orderly's eyes followed the direction of the lieutenant's gaze, suddenly opened wide. Forgetting that Fitz was just recovering from a faint, the orderly let go of him and sprang to the bed. Fitz, by now, had steadied it sufficiently to follow, which he did, only to come up short. The orderly was leaning over the lifeless body. His hands moved from Smitty's head to the side of his face. Then his fingers went down to the free hand that lay motionless on the covers. The orderly felt the boy's pulse and looked up. "He's dead," he said in a hollow tone. "They go awful quick sometimes. Just like that. Awful quick." The orderly released the buckle holding the wounded arm in traction and brought the arm down to the bed. He pulled the sheet up over Smitty's face and turned and walked from the room, with Lieutenant Fitzgerald slowly following him. The orderly went along the corridor to summon a nurse, while Fitz continued downstairs and ran squarely into Captain Riker, who was lighting a cigarette outside Gunther's office. Momentarily, Riker's face betrayed an embarrassed grin, for he hadn't expected Fritz to come down from the ward so soon. Riker wanted to be gone before Gunther began sounding out Fitzgerald regarding his mental aberration, but since he was still there, he tried to think of some tactful way to bring up the subject. Fritz brought it up himself and said, I was up seeing Smitty." "I know," Riker nodded. "Doc says he's going to be okay now." "He isn't." I took a look at his face," Fitz paused ominously. "Right away I knew. Then a minute later he was gone." As Riker stared, his look of disbelief turned to awe, and his tone became a low, tense whisper as he asked, "The same thing that you saw before?" "The same thing. The odd look, the funny light, or whatever it was. But I knew, Captain, I knew." "Fitz, I can't explain this, but I don't want you to explain it. How can anybody explain it? I want you to believe it. That's all." Riker's slow nod showed that he was ready to believe it. Then, as Gunther came from his office, Riker suddenly reserved decision. He was thinking now that perhaps the whole thing was imagination on Fitzgerald's part, since there had been no other reports of Smitty's death. But while Riker hesitated, the orderly came down the stairs and reported to Gunther. "Bed 5, sir, Smith. He just died." "Smith?" Gunther was startled. "I'll go up and look." "For what?" Fritz demanded sharply. There's nothing to look at except a body. I knew he was going to die. I read it on his face, as if someone had painted it there. Go on back up, Gunther told the orderly, who stood staring at Fitz. Then the man ordered mechanically. Oh no! Then the man ordered. Oh no! The man obeyed mechanically. Gunther swung to Fritz. So you knew it, Lieutenant? You bet I knew it, returned Fritz. I tabbed 4 men yesterday. I knew they were all going to get it too. Gunther sidled a knowing look at Riker, then pressed the subject further. Odd, don't you think, Lieutenant? It's not odd. Fritz forced a short laugh. When you go 30 days on the line and don't lose a man, that's odd. When you walk 20 miles and don't get a blister, that's odd. This isn't odd, it's just sheer nightmare. I'm just a lousy, dog-faced line officer who can see death on other people's faces. A lousy, dog-faced line officer who would like to give back that power to wherever it came from. Perhaps, observed Gunther calmly, you're just a dog-faced line officer who is cracking under the strain of having done too much and having felt too much. I'm 5 for 5 now, Doc, Fritz interrupted, with a broad but twisted grin. How many coincidences are needed to prove a fact? How many more faces do I have to look into? Don't you realize that somewhere I picked up a talent they don't teach at OCS? I'm kind of a recording clerk for the Grim Reaper. Don't you know that? Fitzgerald's voice became hysterical as he demanded, put tape over my eyes, would you? Or can't you poke them out or do something so I won't be able to see anything, just so I won't have to look at any more faces? Gunther turned and spoke quietly to Riker. Better take him along with you. Maybe he'll work out of his delusion. If not, we'll put him in and run some checks. Okay, Doc. Nothing more was said on the subject by either Riker or Fitzgerald. At least not then. Riker was willing to believe that Fitz had believed what Fitz had told him, and Fitz knew it. So they were in close accord. That enabled Riker to keep his most valuable lieutenant for a time at least. Then came the night when the GI trucks again were ready, with their tailgates down and the men packing gear by the light of lanterns in preparation for a jump off. In the company commander's tent, Captain Riker was in front of the map board, talking to 4 lieutenants, among them Fitzgerald. All were in fatigues, helmets, and sidearms, ready for a move, as Riker told them. I'll give it to you just as I got it from regiment. We spearhead the attack. We go to this point on the Pasig River. He indicated it on the map. The highway bridge is out, but over here to the east, the army is sticking across a bailey. It should be done at 0200. We'll move across at the point of the spearhead. Baker and Charlie Company will follow us. Up here, some Filipino guerrillas, will be crossing by boat unobserved, we hope. Riker moved his finger up the river. This job will be to take any and all guns and Japs, all the guns the Japs have on this other side. So we should get across that bridge against only small arms. Any questions? There were none. The 4 lieutenants simply stared at Riker as though expecting to hear more. That's it then, Riker said. We've got about 22 minutes before we head up on the trucks. Give each platoon a good briefing. Belts, 5 grenades apiece, 6 clips of ammo, no backpacks, good luck. 3 lieutenants filed from the tent. The 4th remained, still staring at Riker, who looked up and asked rather sharply, What's the matter, Fitz? There was no reply. Riker ripped down the map, folded it up and poked it inside the makeshift desk. Fitzgerald's stare remained fixed, but his eyes were going wider, and with good reason. From some unseen source, most certainly not the colonel's lantern, an odd light was bathing Riker's face in a weird glow, identically to the radiance that Fitz had seen on Smitty's face and on the others before him. We're going to have to stop this here. It's really kind of weird that this guy can see this weird light, but we should be done with that one tomorrow, next time. Anyways, we have been reading from Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, 26 Unforgivable Explorations into the Realm of the Supernatural, adapted by Walter B. Gibson, and specifically we have been reading the Purple Testament. And I have no idea what's going on, but it sounds fascinating. Anyways, if you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, want to support me in any way, or if you want to join the Discord server, all information will be in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.